Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another session that we've got to provide you with information about estate and legacy planning. And today's session is going to take a closer look at what we can do with joint tenancies. But what I found is some people end up disinheriting their kids by the way they titled and using joint tenancy. So we'll take a look at that. I'd like to introduce you to the team of Fabulous Fridays. And the first individual is myself. Hello. I am the Family Economics Specialist for MSU Extension here in Bozeman. And with me who is assisting is Carrie. Carrie is the one that did that fabulous website that you've been able to take a look at. She's also taking care of the recordings to make sure that if you miss a session, the recording is there and you'll have a chance to take a look at it. And I'm excited to report that we now have 217 folks that have registered for our Fabulous Friday series. So hello to all you Montanans. And we also have 13 out-of-staters. So we give you a hello as well, and just again caution you that what I will be talking about is Montana law. Now, we have discovered that through a couple of calls and emails that some individuals have said, Marsha, I enjoy seeing you live. And it's very difficult to see you in this itty bitty box that we've got at the top of the screen. And so what we're going to do is just give you an idea of changing the layout. For example, you have the opportunity on your end to go over to the far right-hand side, and you can click on that, and what it will do is give you some choices for your screen. So you might want to experiment with that. I don't think you'll lose us. You'll just have me either real big or small, just depending on what it is that you're after. And I hope that that will help. One of the persons that called and said, well, Marsha, I hate to say it, but you're just kind of boring. And I thought, no, I can't be boring. So if you notice me with a little more energy today, I'm trying to get out of that boring mode that I hear that I am. So one way that we can try to involve you in what's going on is using some engagement tools. And let's get an idea of how to use that. Basically, you'll just click on yes or no, or you watch the recording. So Carrie has pulled up the poll, and I would like for you to indicate, did you attend last Friday's Fabulous Fridays in which we were talking about dying without a will? So you can say yes, you can say no, or you can thrill me and say that you watched the recording. Thanks to Carrie getting that done and having it on our Montana YouTube type situation. So Carrie, do we have most of our folks responding? Okay, what are our responses? Okay, it looks like that we have the majority of you that did watch last time, and we do have a couple of new folks. And then we still have a bunch that have not answered. So if you can answer, we would really appreciate that to just give us the sense of what's going on. Now, one more question in starting out.
Marsha, sorry to interrupt, but we can't see your webcam at all.
I'm sorry?
We can't see your webcam at all.
Ah, well, now that's interesting. I was so relieved when it came on. I noticed it wasn't there before. And on my end, it shows it. Drat. I was hoping we would not have any difficulties this go around. I mean, I can't even show you this really neat item that I have on but if you can't see me, there's no sense talking about it. Carrie, I've stopped the video.
Marsha, there is some attendees that can see you, but I can't, and I don't think Brett can see you also, but that's okay. Just keep on going on.
Okie dokie. Well, we will move forth. Okay, let's try another screen here. we would like to get a sense of, have you taken any action since you saw last week's session? Did you read the Dying Without a Will? Did you try out the Dying Without a Will website? Did you share some information? And then if you did something else as a result of the session, please tell us in the chat room. Are you visiting with some friends? Are you visiting with your children, your spouse? Give us an idea of maybe something that I said that triggered you to take some action. Now, for those of you that can see me, I got to show you this. Now, don't you think this is just really stylish? And if you can guess what it is, put your response in the chat room. And who knows, you might win a prize. Okay, Carrie, looks like we've maybe got some responses in. What are we finding? Well, it looks like we got a few folks that did try out the Dying Without a Will website, and we've got some people that are sharing the information. And if you think of something that you did, please feel free to put that in the chat room. All righty. So as usual, I'm going to use wildflowers as reminders for some of the things that we'll talk about, because these shall help you with key points about Fabulous Friday's topics. And don't forget, we have the chat room. That's your opportunity to ask questions as we go along. And as some of those come up, Carrie will say, hey, Marsha, need to stop and ask a question. So feel free to take advantage of that. And then we're just so delighted today because we do have a special guest. We've got Brett that's going to be joining us at the end, and she will be sharing some information about the 4-H program. Now, this is my steer's head. You've had a chance to maybe see that if you've attended in the past. And what is it that I want to steer you towards today? Well, basically, I want to create an awareness of the potential consequences of placing your property in joint tenancy with right of survivorship. It doesn't mean joint tenancies are wrong, but I want you to know the full consequences of that. Then also, I want to share with you a little bit of the difference between joint tenancy with right of survivorship and a tenancy in common. Now here we have a prickly poppy. This is a photograph that my hubby took while we were in Utah, and I thought it was the perfect item to talk about real and personal property and how sometimes the results can be prickly, or even reaching that decision. How are we going to place the property? Joint tenancy, tenancy in common, or solely owned? So as I traveled the state before we had COVID, I was asking this question of them, and I want to ask it of you. What is the way that you have titled most of your real and personal property? Do you have it solely owned? Do you have it in a joint tenancy with right of survivorship, or as a tenancy in common? And I do other in there because maybe what you have done is you've got a business organization, like an LLC, general partnership, corporation that's maybe an S or a C. So let us know how most of your property is titled. Okay, it looks like we've got some responses here, and we've got joint tenancy with right of survivorship. And you know, that is exactly what I've discovered with when I was on the road, so to speak.
Marsha, someone in the chat window did respond to a revocable living trust.
Okay, that's another way. Great. We've got somebody that have titled their property into the name of a revocable living trust. And that means that they have a trust document that indicates how that property is going to be distributed upon their death. But as I was saying, we've got joint tenancy with right of survivorship is the most popular way, as it was with you. So my basic urge for you is to just make sure that you know how your property is titled, because it may make a difference in how you're going to write the will or take advantage of payable on death beneficiaries. Now here we happen to have monkey flowers. And these pink ones, they almost look identical, but what they remind me of is the most typical way that parents are doing things. And what I've discovered is we have a situation here, a mom. And what she has done is put her checking account in joint tenancy with her daughter, Susan. Now, the reason that she's done that is she wants Susan to pay her doctor bills, to take care of items that, mom would just like some help with some of that financial management. So that's what she's done. Well, then we take a look, and I wish I could have talked to the mom, because I would have said, if your daughter divorces, what we've got is your property involved in that divorce. If your daughter gets sued, that $80,000 that you've got in that checking account could be a problem there. And what if your daughter becomes addicted to drugs or alcohol of some sort? Well, nothing's to keep her from going in and removing the money from the account. And the same way if she has creditor claims. But anyway, mom says, don't worry. What I've done is write a will. And now what I'm doing is leaving the property equally among my 3 daughters. Okay, so let's have a question. How is that $80,000 going to be divided? Is it going to be equally among Sarah's 3 daughters? Is it going to go all to Susan because of the joint tenancy? Is it going to go to Montana because we've got a conflict between the will and the joint tenancy? Or do we have to have a court case? And I even give you a choice of D. All of the above answers are wrong. So tell me what your opinion is on how that property is going to be divided. Okay. Do we have some responses here, Carrie? Looks like we do. And we have most of you saying that is all going to go to Susan because of that joint tenancy. And that's 23% of you. So I'm excited to see that because it means I did not fool you. Yes, indeed, with that joint tenancy, the daughter Susan is going to receive it all. Absolutely. She is the one that gets mom's 80 grand. And then the question would be, will Susan share because she knows what mom's wishes were? Now, I could ask you to put that response in the chat room, just real quickly. Do you think that Susan is going to share with her 2 sisters? Not knowing anything, what do you think? Do we have any responses, Carrie?
Yes, some people say no. Most of them say no.
Oh my, we're not thinking very highly of Susan, are we?
Couple people said yes.
Okay, well, that's the thing. It's going to really be up to Susan's conscience as to what she does, because she is not required under any law to distribute that to her 2 sisters. And the reality is, if she does, then we've got gift tax situation, and we won't worry about that at the moment. But you see, the summary of this is that joint tenancy with right of survivorship takes priority over a will. So when you're writing a will, you need to keep that in consideration. And that's something that your attorney should ask you. How do you have your property titled? Because he or she needs to know that so that the will that you're writing will do what you want it to do. So I've had people say, well, Marsha, what can a person do? I need help with taking care of my bills. Well, the Montana Multiple Party Account Act has taken care of this. They now allow us to have an agency designation. So what Sarah could have done is to say, I want Susan to be my agent. That means she could write checks for mom, pay the bills, but she has no ownership rights. And so the form is actually now on the signature card. Well, if you're like me, you opened your account years and years ago, so you've never seen that new form that they have. But you have that opportunity. You can say, I want a multiple party account with right of survivorship or without. Now they've got some of that legalese in there. At the death of the party, deceased party's owners passes as a part of the deceased party's estate. Whew. But it gives you a choice then. And that means even if Susan wanted to go in and really take out mom's money, you know, she can't do that. It's a situation where the daughter is helping, and then upon mom's death, what happens is mom's will takes over, and mom is saying, I want it to be split equally among my 3 kids. And ta-da, they've accomplished that, or mom has accomplished that. So the fabulous Friday tip from our monkey flowers is you need to decide if a multiple party account is what you would rather have than having that joint tenancy. So it's something to think about. Oh, I still have the joint monkey flowers there. Now I'm going to look at couples. So let's look at a young couple. Now, this is some information that you would be able to share with your kids or your grandkids. And I'll show you what I mean. We've got joint tenancy with a married couple. And they're young, you know, and right now, let's just say they don't have kids. So how do we know it's a joint tenancy? It's John Doe and Mary Doe as joint tenants with right of survivorship. And on real property, we're making sure we say, and not as tenants in common. There'll never be any argument about whether or not that is a joint tenancy. So I've got my couple here. I've got Tim and Sharon, and they're newly married, and they're so excited. And Tim's family has given them a farm upon their marriage, you know, going to help them get started. And oh, unfortunately, what we have is a car accident. Tim dies immediately. Sharon dies 3 days later. A really sad situation. So who's going to receive that property if Tim dies first and Sharon dies on the 6th day, and they didn't write a will, they don't have kids yet, they don't think they need one? Okay, how do you think that that property is going to be distributed? Is it going to go to Tim's parents? Is it going to Sharon's parents? Is it 1/2 to each? Or will it go to the state of Montana simply because they do not have children? So tell me with your, I want to say response clicker, because that's what I use in public meetings. But let's take a look at your opinion. Okay, I've got the majority of you, which is 10%, that are saying it's Sharon's parents. And if we were live, I would ask you, and I bet I would hear, because Sharon survived the longest. And that would be sensible. You know, it's logic. But no, that's not the way that Montana is going to divide it. Okay? If you were from Kansas, that would be right. But here we go. It's going to be divided 1/2 and 1/2. Okay, so that means of the assets that Tim and Sharon have, half of it's going to go to Tim's folks. The other half is going to go to Sharon's folks. Now, remember, I said that Tim's parents gifted them a farm upon their marriage. Well, I'm sure they'll give it back. Well, no, it's Sharon's parents that would need to give it back. But would they? Well, we don't know. So here's the reason for this law is Montana put in a survival requirement. And the survival requirement says you must survive, or an heir must survive 120 hours or 5 days to be treated as an heir. And you see, Sharon did not make that requirement. And I'm trying to get this young couple to realize why they need to write a will. So I use this example. And then I made it even a little more complicated. We see it's 1/2 and 1/2. And I say, okay, let's use this example. Let's say, Tim, you die first. And Sharon survives 6 days. And then she passes away. Now whose folks receive the property? And all of you are out there shouting, Sharon's folks. And you'd be right. Absolutely. So now Tim is very interested in writing a will because you see, it was his folks that gifted them the farm. And I dare say he would want to give that back to them. And of course, we could have the situation where Tim is the one that survives the longest. Well, then he gets all of the well, let's just say money that Sharon may have brought into the marriage. So anyway, it goes to his folks. So his parents would receive everything. So the thing about this joint tenancy business, sure, it's going to go to the surviving joint tenant, but you can have in your will where you want it to go if both of the joint tenants die within 5 days. You can even write in the will 30 days, whatever it is that you want, so that we don't have this roulette situation of all going to Tim's parents, all going to Sharon's parents, or one half to Tim's and one half to Sharon's. You know, we want to have an estate plan that's not just joint tenancy and then who survives the longest. All righty. So married couples need to be aware of that 120-hour or 5-day survival requirement. Now, if I had to have you guess what you think these particular flowers are, I've had in my audiences everything from daisies to what have you, but they're really white mule's ears. Okay, and now there's a house where those were up at Big Sky. So have you heard the phrase, mom or dad is stubborn as a mule? Okay, maybe that's only something we said in Kansas as I was growing up, but we did say that, yeah. So what I want to show you is the consequences of dad being so-called stubborn as a mule. Okay, so let's look at this situation. We have a dad here. And unfortunately, what happened is his wife died years ago. And so he has all the property in his name only. And he has 2 children. Well, he tells me, I don't need a will. I know that if Montana is going to take control here, my kids are going to get that ranch half and half. Okay, so I would agree with him. That's what Montana law would do. And if he had a will, he could do the same thing. But I wanted to give him this situation. What if the surviving spouse marries a wow floozy from Billings? Okay, because what happened is dad indeed remarried. Okay. And what I'm doing is getting a call at my office from one of the kids saying, we want you to talk to our dad because, well, here's the situation. Well, I can't do that in my position, just call him out of the blue and say, hey, I've got a call from your kids and they're real concerned about your joint tenancy. Well, the dad is not worried because he has written a will and he's telling them they're going to get the ranch. Okay, dad, the mule dies. The wife is their surviving joint tenant. She receives it all, just like our situation with the checking account. Well, that is not what you want to have happen, I don't think. Well, at least his 2 kids don't think so. But then let's say she dies. Now, excuse me. Let's say she dies. Where does the property go then? That's what I get for getting excited. I just spilled some stuff. Emergency. Okay, so hold on a second. My keyboard could be a mess. All right. Let's see what happens. Her kids inherit all the property. Yes, it's the surviving joint tenant. His 2 kids do not receive anything. Her 2 kids did. Again, not exactly what, excuse me. Okay, we're back. So we've got her kids receiving the property. But let's say she didn't die. Let's say what she did was marry the good-looking hunk in Missoula. Okay, what happens then? Well, you're not going to believe it, but she did. She placed the property in joint tenancy with her new husband. The wife died, and now who receives the property? He does. Her new husband, because she put it in joint tenancy. So this is what I mean about having a joint tenancy and the potential for disinheriting the children, because dad disinherited his, the wife ended up disinheriting hers. So what a mess in that family situation. So I think joint tenancy with right of survivorship may not be the way to go if you want to protect your children from a prior marriage. And
Marsha, there's a quick question. Sorry to interrupt.
that's okay.
If she adopts his kids as part of the marriage, they would inherit a share, right?
Okay, let's say that that's what happens. Is I'm going to go back perhaps. Okay, so we're going to say, I'll make it easy. Because they got married when the kids were young, he adopted hers and she adopted his. Okay, if we go back without this other husband, we'll do that. Okay, so they've adopted one another's. Well, if it's still in joint tenancy, it's still going to go to the survivor. Okay. Now, what they could have done is to say, we want to put this property as a tenant in common. So he owns an undivided interest of 50. She owns an undivided interest of 50. Okay. And this is what an attorney would recommend if they were going to get married and they needed a prenuptial agreement. It would have been a good discussion to have. And of course, MSU Extension has a premarital mock guide to give you some ideas. But you see, with the tenancy in common, he could have written a will and say, I want my share to go to my two kids. And then she could have written a will and say, I want my share to go to my two kids. So that's what we can do with a tenancy in common that we can't do with the joint tenancy unless all the joint tenants fall within that survival requirement that happens to be in the will. So I hope that answered the question. And if not, that person can email me and I'd be glad to discuss that further with you. So my fabulous Friday tip from the white mule's ears is, I guess I said this before, that may not be the way to go if you're in a remarried situation. And I get lots of calls about this because, like this morning, somebody has 5 kids and she has 3 kids. And what should they do? Well, I can't tell them what to do, but I can say, if you don't have a premarital agreement, you can have a post-marital agreement and sit down and decide, okay, he brought this into the marriage, she brought this into the marriage, and now what we're going to do is each decide what we want to do with our separate property. And then if we, put 2 together for down payment on a house or something like that, then they can reach a decision about the one that's joint if they decide to do so. So these are teeny tiny twin flowers. And what this makes me think about are the twin brothers that I read into in eastern Montana. And what was happening, these twin brothers were operating one of those, what do you call them? You feed the cows. Feeder something. You know what I mean. Okay, and they say that they have joint ownership. And I'm saying, well, what does that mean? Do you have a joint ownership as joint tenancy with right of survivorship, or is your joint ownership as a tenancy in common? And their response is, well, we don't know. And, I'm trying not to scream and say, you what? You've been operating together for this long and you don't know? And of course, the wives are involved, and they said, by gum, we are going to find out. So this is what they found out, is they had been operating all these years in a joint tenancy with right of survivorship. So we've got Rob and we've got Bob, and they are both married, and ironically, they both have children. Okay, so what happens with this joint tenancy? Well, if Rob dies, it all goes to Bob. That means the wife doesn't receive anything and the children don't receive anything. Now, granted, you can't disinherit your spouse in Montana, so she's going to get something. But if we add up everything, it could be she gets what's called the right to an elective share. Okay, we'll leave that for another time. So we look at that one step further, and we find if Bob dies, of course, it winds up going to his wife. She receives everything, and then upon her death, it goes to their two children. So this is not the estate plan that this couple wanted to have. And that's all I need to do sometimes is show consequences. What are the potential consequences? So now this tenancy in common that I told you about, that means if they're operating that way, he has one half and Bob has one half. So they have an undivided one half interest. That's what a tenancy in common is. We can't have a house and draw a line down the center and say he owns this and she owns that part. Nope, we don't do it that way. It's an undivided one half interest of the whole thing. All right, so we go back to the situation where they're married, where they've got kids. And we're going to look at Rob and Bob. In this case, Bob dies. Well, Bob can take a share and he can say, what I'm going to do is, oh, he died without writing a will. Drat. So we've got Bob dying, and we want to know where his half is going to go. Is it going to Rob, Bob's wife, Bob's children, Bob's siblings, or Bob's parents? So let me know by clicking on what you think is the right answer. And excuse me a sec. Let's see what our responses say. Okay, I've got 21% of you that are saying that it is Bob's wife. Okay, I see I didn't fool any of you there, or else I've got a really smart group this morning. Wonderful, because what happens is you are correct. She's going to receive the half. Okay, so that means she is going to be working with Rob. And maybe that's what they want to have. But then again, maybe they needed to do some business arrangements here and say what we need is some life insurance on Bob so that she or Rob could, be the owner and beneficiary so that he could buy out the wife. Maybe they don't get along or something. But anyway, there's choices out there when we're doing an estate plan. So it could be with a will, Rob could leave his share to a child, and then that child would own half, and Bob over here would own the other half. Or maybe what he does is write a will, and he's going to leave 1/4 to his spouse and 1/8 to each of his children. He has choices, and that's why he needs to do, and the other brother family needs to do estate planning. So you need to read the title on your property. You really need to know how it is titled. I've had some attorneys, one shared with me, I trusted my dad. I asked my dad, how is the property titled? And he said, oh, it's tenancy in common. And turns out it wasn't. It was joint tenancy with right of survivorship. And he said, after that, I asked every client I had, let me see the documentation. So one of the mock guides that we have is estate planning getting started. And in that, I make a list of the items that your attorney needs to see or at least know about when you're doing an estate plan. The second thing is be sure that if you've got this joint tenancy type situation, that it's not your only estate plan. Now here we have, those of you that have been to Glacier, you recognize that right away. It's a common bear grass. And maybe you haven't seen this one, but it's near water and it's called a common butterwort. And then here we have one from Yellowstone National Park that's a common blue-eyed grass. So I think there's something going on here with common law marriages. If you recall, the end of last week, we did have a question on that. And I decided, well, I spent just a teeny tiny bit of time talking about it. But I want to know, how many years does a couple have to live together to have a common law marriage? Okay, and Carrie, you got a poll for that one? Okay, so our choices: 15 years, 7 years, 4, 1, 0. I left the 0 out because I was going through this again. I said, oh, nobody had marked 0. So 15, 7, 4, or 1. What gives us a common law marriage? Okay, Carrie's already shut that off, and we've got 23% of you saying 7 years. And indeed, that is exactly what I heard when I moved to the state. And come to find out, that is not correct. What it is not years. It's not the number of years that you've been together. And what the Supreme Court has done is to come up with 3 things that can help determine whether or not you're married. But let's just look at, when does it become an issue? And it's typically at the death of one of the parties. So I'm going to look here at John and Mary. John and Mary have lived together for 15 years. He has 2 kids from a prior marriage, and Mary doesn't have any. So that's what the drawing looks like. I like to see things so I can figure out what happens. Well, would you believe? Mary, of course, is going to assert that a common law marriage existed. And the 15 years that they've been together would be an indicator, but it's not just 7. So yes, we've been together. Yes, he gave me a ring. There would be other things. People would be called forward to say, oh yeah, John referred to Mary as his wife. You know, we need that documentation. But the issue is, if she is a common law wife, she gets $1 million. And his 2 children get $475 each. Well, you can guess what the kids are going to say. Nah, it didn't exist. Nope, Dad, he honored our mother forever. He did not consider Mary to be his wife. So that means they are the ones that get it, and Mary does not receive anything. So what amount can she inherit? Well, it does depend on how they titled the property again. So if John and Mary had put that $2 million worth of property in joint tenancy with right of survivorship, it wouldn't matter if they had a common law marriage. What would matter is the contract, and it says it goes to the survivor. Now, is there a beneficiary designation? And this now would be called a transfer on death deed. And did he use that to give it to Mary upon his death? Well, then she would get it, common law or not. That transfer on death deed is a contract. And then maybe he wrote a will, maybe he established a trust, but he would be providing for Mary. And so that's what he needs to look at, those alternatives. And then I've got a situation here of Laura and Jeff. A different kind of thing, because neither one of them have children. So we have a same $2 million estate. And of course, if it's a common law marriage, Jeff gets everything. Woohoo, he's going to say. And we've got the 2 brothers, we've got niece and nephews, and they're kind of putting their head together and say, well, okay, she died. And you see, if it's not a common law marriage, Jeff gets 0. then her two brothers get 1/4 each. And you can see what is happening by right of representation. Okay, one niece there gets 1/4, and we have two nephews receiving 1/8 each because they're splitting 1/4. So the publication that we have a mock guide, goes into examples like this and encourages people to, obtain some legal advice while you're alive and clarify your marital status. I know there is one situation where a couple, they'd been living together for a long time. As a matter of fact, people didn't know they weren't married. So then they went in to get Social Security. And the Social Security agent was telling me this story because Social Security requires a lot of things to prove that you are a common law wife. But when he asked them about, well, why? And they said, you know what? We had these kids. We were just embarrassed that we had never got married. So we just never did do it. So there's lots of stories out there in Montana. So the Fabulous Fridays tip from the Common Butterwort is you can protect the inheritance rights of the children or grandchildren, but you've got to do a will to do that. And do take a look. And if you have a friend in this situation, you can be kind of subtle. You can tell them, oh, you've been participating in this Fabulous Fridays, and encourage them to enroll too, but give them a copy of that mock guide, and they will probably thank you very much for doing that. Well, it's about time to wrap it up, but I want to do a couple of checks with you. I hope I steered you toward an awareness of the potential consequences of using joint tenancy with right of survivorship as your only estate plan. And I hope I steered you to an awareness of the difference between joint tenancy with right of survivorship and tenants in common. Okay. And if you don't have a memory like this elephant's head, and I really hope you see the elephants there, see the ears and the nose, that's why they call it elephant's head. To reemphasize, we do have 48 mock guides. And I've got one that is in process right now talking about carryover basis and step over basis, and what happens to property when we die. How do we establish a fair market value on that? And we've got one on testamentary trust. I'm so excited to finally have some of these done. And don't forget, these mock guides are also available at our MSU County Extension offices. They can print them out for you. They may already have a copy, or you can always download those because we do have them on the web as well. Now, next week, we are going to be looking at avoiding probate. And I've got really good news for you because we now have a form that you can even put a beneficiary designation on the title of your vehicle or vessel. So you'll be learning more about that. Now, we're going to take a look at our guest, and I'm going to remain on the line after we've had a chance to talk to Brett and answer any questions that did appear in the chat room. So you still have an opportunity to ask questions. So let's take a look here. We've got Brett. Brett, are you there? Oh, she is. Okay. I'm delighted to introduce you to Brett. And what I'm going to do, if I can figure it out, is stop sharing. Okay. And then you can change your layout so that you don't have us as tiny people. I'm going to take a full screen view.
Oh boy.
That was disastrous. Okay, it's not disaster because we can still see Brett. Okay, this is Brett. Tell us your official title, Brett.
My official title is the Youth Leadership Associate Specialist for MSU Extension, and I am within the 4-H Center for Youth Development. and we are the youth development program for MSU Extension. So it's a wonderful position to be in.
Yes, and I see you like I have. Uh-oh, I lost my.
Oh, did you lose you lost your scarf?
See, it wasn't a scarf.
Oh, it was a mask.
It
I
was a
have the
mask.
same one.
I thought it would be so clever, but I had an accident with. You might have missed me
Yeah,
spilling my.
so
Okay, and I see you have yours has a clover on it, doesn't it?
I do. I do. I have
Yeah, the
my
clover
MSU
represents
Extension
4-H.
4-H shirt on.
What are the 4-H's?
Head, heart, hands, and health. My
Aha,
club, my
okay.
community, my country,
Yeah,
and my world.
right. That's the 4-H pledge. Well, tell us more about what you do in your position there with the 4-H Center.
So I have been privileged to be with the 4-H Center for over 16 years now, and I have worked with predominantly the teen audience, so the older 4-H members in the program. 4-H starts out, can be as early as 5 years old and go up to 19 years old. And then being on the campus of MSU here, I work with a lot of our alumni that have graduated out of the program. So I work predominantly with that high school, older middle school age group and do a lot of leadership development. By the time they get to that 13, 14-year-old age, they've mastered a lot of their projects and they're looking for greater opportunities to grow their leadership skills and be involved in their community. So I help them and I help our county extension agents develop programs that engage those kids in leadership opportunities.
I've had the opportunity to participate in evaluating some projects that were being submitted for the Jerry Finn Community Award. And I was so impressed with the projects that the kids were coming up with. But I tell you, one of the things I noticed during COVID, you would send out an email and this is Brett doing training on Sunday afternoons with 4-Hers. So tell us what you were doing about that.
4-Hers tend to be very, very busy. So Sunday afternoons tend to be the only time that we can have time in their very busy schedules to engage with them. And so I don't mind. I love seeing them on Sunday afternoons. But we have several statewide events to bring. A big part of 4-H leadership is really bringing kids together statewide, and they do things in their small communities, then they do things in their county, and then we bring them together statewide so that they can engage with each other in an even bigger audience. And so because of COVID, we were not able to have some of our face-to-face events, but we didn't want to lose that statewide engagement. So just like this, we provided some leadership workshop opportunities for that older audience to build their skills, work in breakout rooms together to solve problems, plan service projects, those sorts of things. We did two types of programs. We did a older youth leadership development that was really about personal leadership development, learning their leadership style, learning how to present information, all those kind of higher level skill building things. And then we did a 7-week over 7 months. So one Sunday a month, and it was a program we did that was open to 11-year-olds, 11 and up. So that's really those youth that are just starting to what is leadership? What does it mean to be a leader in my community? What kind of skills do I need to work on? Do I have to be outgoing? What's it all about? And so what we did there was that was when people could get together in small groups. And so they got together in their local communities, and then we presented statewide workshops. So they were in small groups together face to face, and then we presented the information to them, and then they were able to work on it in their small groups and plan a project, use those skills, and really practice those skills, whether it was putting on a workshop, putting on a service project, whatever it was. So those were our two virtual, and they were so successful that we're going to continue with that leadership academy for those younger youth, because they took to it, and it's a really nice, good model. So we're going to continue with that starting in January this year.
Wow. Yeah, I was in 4-H when I was a kid, and that was many years ago. And the kind of things now, over 200 projects in the 4-H program. And one thing I noticed that almost every state has is a special time for kids to get together. And at MSU, it's 4-H Congress. Tell us about how that works.
It is 4-H Congress, and if we have any 4-H alumni on here, they may remember coming to 4-H Congress themselves here on campus at MSU, and in other states they have similar statewide. Sometimes they're called leadership events, sometimes they're called 4-H Congress, and we do have a national 4-H Congress event that's also celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. Youth used to go to Chicago. And so I have talked to many alumni that have fond memories of going to Congress here at MSU and earning their spot to go to National 4-H Congress. And it's the same. We have 20 individuals that earned their spot to go to National Congress back in July, and I will be taking them to Atlanta in November to go to National Congress again. So our 4-H Foundation continues to support those amazing opportunities like our local 4-H Congress that about 200 to 400 youth and volunteers come to MSU Bozeman in the summer and participate in competitive events, leadership workshops, lots of work content workshops with all of the great professors we have here at MSU, lots of community events, and just lots of interacting with each other and learning from each other and building that network. We really focus on building that network of peer involvement. And so you go home and you have all those people in your web that you can call upon for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and now because one benefit, if we can call it, of COVID is we've learned that we can communicate like this. And of course, the young folks with their phones, they just do everything. And I was glad that you mentioned the 4-H Foundation because that is another co-sponsor of our series of Fabulous Fridays. And I was just noticing in the paper the other night that we had a very individual who was a 4-H leader. And so she requested upon her death that instead of people buying flowers, etc., that she would like for people to make donations to the Montana 4-H Foundation because she was a leader and she very much believes in the program. And I think that is just really a wonderful thing. Like you say, it allows kids to have some of these opportunities that they might not have otherwise. So I'm kind of curious, you're really gung-ho. And every time I see you, you're enthusiastic about whatever's going on. I just love it. And I'm thinking, well, she's probably been a 4-H'er forever. How did you get involved with the 4-H program?
I was not a 4-H'er as a child. I did grow up in a rural area, but I did not have the opportunity to do 4-H. But I actually came to 4-H when I was in college. My husband ran the camping program at University of New Hampshire, their 4-H program, and I was a work study in their office, and I fell in love with the program. Thought I was going to be a teacher, but the classroom was just too small for me. So 4-H gives me this huge classroom. I literally have thousands of high school students that I work with. And so I think of my classroom being the entire state instead of, a small classroom. And so that's how I came to the program, and then I stuck with it. I've actually never worked for anybody else besides 4-H and Extension. And I pride myself on that because I think we do amazing work, and I love, one of my favorite things is when I get the opportunity to talk to alumni that come to school here at MSU or at other places, and they call me and they talk to me about what's going on in their lives, and they know that they have people that really appreciate them and understand them. And I think that that's what 4-H volunteers do. I think that's what 4-H MSU Extension agents do. I think that's what we do here at the statewide program. I think we really provide people for those 4-H members to form relationships with. And we know from all the research that that's what's important.
Yeah, and I just am amazed at some of the things that go on. There's one of our agents has now a 4-H'er that's interning with her. And she's very interested because of her experience in 4-H of joining MSU Extension.
Oh.
So cross fingers that this particular individual, there will be a position open and she will be able to join and kind of do the generational thing. It really does become generational of interest in the 4-H program. And I got to give 4-H Congress, they changed activities. I think it was you that started this job interview opportunity.
The career communications, and
Yes, I had the
you have been the judge
opportunity
for
to,
that for
yeah.
several years, and it's a wonderful contest.
Oh, it is,
Where
and it's
they create a job and that they would be have the skills for, and they have to do a resume and a cover letter, and then the actually competitive part of it is that they have judges that act as the interviewers, and they have to interview with those judges, and that is one statewide contest that takes place at Congress. Yes.
yeah, and it was just I feel for some of them because some of them come in and they're just shaking. Oh, and you think this is a wonderful experience because they've got a chance to, and that's what 4-H is all about, is that leadership, getting the experience, because that little gal someday she's going to get over that, and she's going to be able to interview for a job and know exactly what to do. It's neat.
Well, the first time she interviews is not going to be for her first dream job. It's going to have been in high school or even earlier at an interview. We have, 9-year-olds sitting with judges at our county fairs, doing interview judges, talking to them about their projects. And they do that year after year after year. So we added it up, and there's something like a 4-H member has over 45 opportunities a year to communicate with an adult and present some information. Whereas, so those are skills that by the time they get to do that as adults, it's going to be old hat.
Yeah, that's good. Well, you've been involved with lots of different things with the 4-H program. Do you have one that is your favorite?
So we do have this event, and I love engaging with them at every level. I love when they call me and talk to me, and I love learning about their lives and knowing about their lives. And I always say that the 4-Hers seem to be getting older, and I keep staying the same age. I don't understand. And now I have alumni that are extension agents and are married and have children, and it's awesome. But my favorite 4-H event is actually, it's called Recreation Lab, and it's in the spring, and it travels to different areas of the state. So it's in a different location every year. And normally it's at a high school, and we sleep on the gym floor, bring our air mattresses and sleep on the gym floor and eat cafeteria food. And I know you're wondering, why is this Brett's favorite? And the reason is because all these kids, about 300 kids, are in that high school for the whole weekend doing all these activities, talent shows, and it's kind of like a lock-in. And just watching them show up with their sleeping bag and their pillow, not knowing anybody. And then by the end of the weekend, they've got all their friends and they're taking pictures as they leave. And they may be in Sydney and made a friend in, Dillon. And I love that. And then next year, they'll remember their friend from Rec Lab and go to the prom with each other. And I think that is just my favorite thing, the opportunity for them to meet people from all over the state.
Yeah, that sounds really neat. I've never participated sleeping on the floor, but I
always
heard
bring
about
a very
Rec
tall
Lab.
air mattress.
Yeah, I would need one for sure.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Brad, I'm just so delighted that you were able to join us this morning and share this wonderful information about the 4-H program. And maybe some of our viewers out there have thought about, how about my grandkids? Do they belong to 4-H? And if not, you can find out information. That's kind of how I got involved in 4-H. Is I had a friend that was in 4-H, and gee, it sounded neat. So her sister came over to my house and talked with my mom and dad and said, you know, Marsha would be really great. And I still remember being scared to death doing a demonstration.
Yeah.
But we did team demonstrations back then, and so that helped with it. So I'm a supporter of the 4-H program as well. I think it is a great youth program, and thank you for joining us. And we're going to say goodbye to you, and I'm going to see if I can answer any estate planning questions that were in the chat room. So thanks again, Brett. See you around. Okay, Carrie, are you there? And do we have any questions in the chat room?
Yes, one person would like to know how they can tell how their house is titled.
How their house is titled. Okay, one of the things that you can do is to go to the clerk, clerk and recorder. And they have all the way, you know, the deeds that have been filed, all that type of information. If you have a file at home, when you purchased the house, there would be some information there. But for sure, it's at the clerk and recorder's office, because that's where they have the name so that they can send out the tax bill to the individuals. So don't necessarily use the tax bill. Take a look at it, you know, in real life. And it could be maybe a long time ago, you put it in the safe deposit box and you've just forgotten about it. You might be able to pull it out from there. So take a look and see how you titled it.
Okay, next question. So if you have your house with your husband, is it best to have it in tenancy?
I'm sorry, I missed that, Carrie. Could you repeat it?
So if you have your house with your husband, is it best to have it in tenancy in common?
Oh, I see what you're asking. Okay. Now, that is a legal question. And of course, being that I'm not an attorney, I can't say it's best to have one way or the other. What I can say is, what is your objective? Maybe we want to have the house in joint tenancy because we know if one dies, the other gets it. Then we could do a TOD, transfer on death deed, to say it goes to a third party upon the death of both of you. You could make those determinations. So you can't say one is best over the other. It's looking at the circumstances. So we have a mock guide that talks about property ownership, in that it provides information, more information about joint tenancy and tenancy in common. And so I would suggest that you read that mock guide, and I think you will be able to reach a decision on your own then about what is best for us in our circumstances. Because it could be you decide to do it solely on one person or the other, because you're wanting to, you know, if you have those kids from a prior marriage, you want to protect them. And again, the joint tenancy won't do that. Okay, Carrie, how about anything else there?
Yes. Can a will specify that a house passed to kids as tenants in common?
Yes, you can do that. You'll find when you look at the transfer on death deed, you can also do a transfer on death deed to the individuals with the request that it be in tenants in common. As a matter of fact, it just comes automatic once you do a transfer on death deed, and then you say it goes to these as tenants in common. Then all they'll need is an affidavit of death for you when you're gone, and boom, it's in their names as you requested tenancy in common.
Great. So another question, Marsha, is both questions are multiple party accounts. Checking already payable on death. Should I still assign an agent? Montana is a tax home. Yeah. What if a checking account is set up with a Wells Fargo bank in Arizona?
Okay, with the Wells Fargo bank, what was the last part?
Yeah, it says, what if a checking account is set up with a Wells Fargo bank in Arizona?
Oh, okay. So what we've got there is you can look and see what Arizona law says. Arizona, take a look at the signature card. The signature card in that teeny tiny little print lets you know what kind that you've got. And I don't know if Arizona has multiple party accounts. A lot of this, for example, we have what's called the Uniform Probate Code, and it's called uniform because many, many states have it. I don't know how many states have the Multiple Party Account Act uh, to see what it says. But again, each state kind of makes its own rules. We have the Uniform Probate Code, but ours is just tweaked a little bit differently than what North Dakota does and what Wyoming does. So the signature card is the key. And they can make a copy of that to send to you so that you can take a look and see. And then you could also just ask them, hey, do you have multiple party accounts? And if so, I would like to see the form. And they would send that to you without any problem, I'm sure, because you're a customer and you have a right to the information. Okay.
Okay, Marsha, another question. Is there a way a will can be carried out without probate? Does Montana allow an executor carry out probate without an attorney?
Okay, there's two questions there. No, let's look at a will. If you want the will to be validated, it has to go through the probate system. In other words, the personal representative has to take the will to the court, and the court then deals with the will, and a copy is put in the probate forms. Now, here's the deal. Sometimes it's not necessary to probate the will, and let me explain why. If you have used payable on death designations on your financial accounts, you've used transfer on death on your mutual funds, and you got a TOD on your transfer on death on your real property, and now we've got the form for the vehicle. It could be in your situation, there is no property to probate. So therefore, we wouldn't need to probate the will. But in one of our sessions, we're going to be talking about personal property items. And we may end up probating the will just to give legal authority to that. So you nominate a personal representative in your will. That personal representative will step in and take a look and say, you know, all of this stuff is transfers outside of probate. There's nothing for the will to probate. So there's no sense going through that expense of having the will go through probate. And I think there was a second question there, Carrie, and I've already forgotten it.
Yes. Does Montana allow an executor carry out probate without an attorney?
Okay, yes. Montana does have a system. Well, as a matter of fact, we have several different ways of doing a probate. And so there are collection of personal property by affidavit, which is under 50,000. Sometimes there's the summary administrative procedure that can be used. If we take a look at the bills and the assets and say, you know, those are taken care of. So the idea is you need to find the probate that's appropriate for your situation. And we have a Mont guide on that. We have a Mont guide that goes through those different ways that you can have probate. And while an individual can do it, the courts of limited jurisdiction has actually some forms that you could use. And depending on how complicated the estate is, it's perfectly okay for a personal representative to just go ahead and handle all of those things. It's up to the personal representative. Can they say, oh, I know how to do this? Or, oh dear, I don't. Maybe I need to hire an attorney to take me through the process. So get that Mont guide on probate and also the one on personal representative responsibilities. And you'll get a sense of what is required when somebody dies. I had a call this morning from a lady whose husband just died a month ago. And she said, oh my gosh, we thought we had things organized. And she said, I'm just overwhelmed with what I still need to do. And I tried to be supportive and said, take it one step at a time. You'll get it done, because she now needs to have a will of her own. Come to find out, the attorney wrote the will for both of them in one document. That's not done anymore. You just don't do that. So you had his will and her will. So that way, when one dies, the other one still has a will. And, you know, she's deciding to do things differently than what they had agreed to 15 years ago. And she believes her husband would understand that because of the circumstances. So anyway, everybody needs their own will. We don't need a mutual will where it's in one document. Okay, Carrie, any others?
Yeah, you have another question here. My single cousin never married, dies without a will. The only survivors are 4 cousins that he grew up with maternal and 4 cousins that he never met paternal. Who gets the property?
Okay, this person that dies without a will, we're going to go and see who the survivors are. And if I hear you right, what we've got are cousins on the maternal side, and we've got cousins on the paternal side. Okay, so what we've got then are 8 people, let's say, 4 on this side, 4 on that side. And then during the probate, they're going to look at, make sure that those are the only heirs. And then what they will do is split what she has 8 directions, assuming that's in Montana. So if you have specifics, I can say visit with an attorney to determine that in the situation. So the probate will be held in the county where the deceased was a resident. Okay.
Okay, you have another question here. You actually have 3 more. That's okay.
Okay.
The first question is, my question is, who gets property if dad remarried at 60, has a prenuptial which allows wife to live on the property for 10 years after his death. He also has a will leaving all to his kids.
Okay. Oh, good. You want me to pretend I'm an attorney again, don't ya? Okay, I'm looking at this, saying, let's look at the circumstances. Number 1, we have a premarital agreement, and we've got to look and see what that premarital agreement said. Did it say, it's a contract, and is the property in his name? Okay. And since he's leaving it to her for 10 years, that sounds very much like a life estate, only it's not a life estate. It's an estate for 10 years. And then I bet the premarital agreement says where it goes after that 10 years. Okay. And the will that we've got saying it all goes to the children can't override that premarital contract. So I would suggest that if there's any question, which it sounds like it is, we need to visit with Dad and say, Dad, maybe this will was written a long time ago. And it's like the kids are going to want to fight and say the will has priority. And they'll probably waste money on an attorney to do that. But it wouldn't, because it's not a contract. A will is not a contract. The premarital is. Where we would run into difficulty is if that premarital agreement was not, let's say his attorney wrote it and she never had the opportunity to have an attorney look at it before she signed it. It's either supposed to be representative on both sides, and you can't have one attorney representing both sides of a situation like that. But she's certainly going to be happier with the 10-year thing than the will that's going to technically disinherit her. So let's encourage those people, especially Dad, to take a look at the will and see if that really does need to be updated. So we don't have the conflict. There's no sense having family drama if we don't need it, because it really does mess up a lot of people's lives. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox on that.
Okay. Next question is, what is the form to attach to titles that allows a TOD? Where can it be found?
Okay, the POD is at like the financial institution. That's under the multiple it's at the institution, the form that you use for that. And some of them, like a certificate of deposit, they'll just simply put POD. And it depends on the institution. With your stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, you may already have a beneficiary designation on those. That's what you would want to check with your broker or the account that you have. And the form may be on the web. It may be one that they need to send to you. The transfer on death deed is available at our MSU extension site. What we have done is locked in or made it available from the legal developer for the state of Montana from Aging Services. And as a matter of fact, she's going to be our guest in a couple of weeks. And so you'll learn more about that. So the forms are out there. And there's no reason that you should have to pay anything for the forms. Like there are some on the web that say, oh, these are all, like the will is for Montana, but they're going to charge you for it. There's no such things as a free lunch, we've discovered. Okay, Carrie, next question, or last question, maybe?
Yes, this is the last question. How does payable on death checking account affect assigned agent checking accounts? Can one checking account have both a POD and agents?
Exactly, because what you're saying, it would be like the Sarah example that I had. We have Sarah here. She wants her daughter to take care of writing the checks. But Sarah has said, I want a POD. And in that case, if her objective is to leave it to all three daughters, she's going to have the signer as one of the PODs. Because you see, once Sarah dies, our signer can no longer write the checks. Okay, because we have a POD on there and it's going to go to these three individuals. So if that's as clear as mud, email me or give me a call. My number is 994-5695. And if I'm working remotely like today, what happens is it comes up on my computer and then I can listen to your message and give you a call right back. Be glad to do that. Well, Carrie, we've got the questions answered, correct?
Correct. They're all
Okay.
answered.
Okay, well, I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and a special thank you to those that stayed around to listen to Brett. She's really one of our great extension colleagues and has so much enthusiasm for the 4-H program. She's just a dear, and I didn't get around to telling you, she just got her master's degree, and who knows, might be going on for that doctorate someday. So thank you for joining us. Hope to see you next week, where we're going to look at these TODs and more details about how to avoid probate. If there's one thing I know Montanans like to do, is let's avoid the cost of probate. Well, our legislature has provided us with some ways to do that, and I'll get into detail about it. So between now and then, be safe and keep healthy. Bye-bye, and we'll see you next week. Okay, Carrie, I'm not touching anything.